Thank you, Todd. Yeah, so my name is Dan Spuller. I serve as a director with the Chamber of Digital Commerce out of Washington, D.C. This afternoon, we're going to have a brief dialogue to discuss several of these questions that we're all facing, taxpayers. And we're going to have a little dialogue first, and then we're going to open up to the audience because I know there's several folks that have some very interesting questions on these topics. So with us today, David Aylor. Since 2007, David Aylor has been building a thriving law practice in the Low Country in South Carolina. He established a very dynamic and experienced presence in the region, and local and national media outlets have routinely solicited his legal analysis and opinions. He has an extensive criminal and civil casework, and they've been featured on multiple news outlets. In addition to succeeding as a criminal defense attorney and civil litigator, David is the acting prosecutor for the city of Hanahan, South Carolina. Prior to his appointment, he served as assistant solicitor in the 9th Circuit's Solicitor's Office for Charleston County. And his participation in the government sector has provided him with a comprehensive view of how the law works on both sides of the courtroom. Also with us this afternoon is Mr. Tyler Gibbons, a CPA in public practice and a partner with Raleigh, McLaurin, and Gibbons. He specializes in the field of financial forensics and provides support on active financial fraud investigations. He works closely with businesses to provide guidance on tax reporting issues as they relate to federal and state compliance, as well as creating and implementing accounting systems and technology. He is currently appointed as a member of the SCA-CPA Legislative Advocacy and Regulatory Committee, as well as their Business Valuations and Forensic Litigations Committee. He specialized in assignments including employee fraud and embezzlement calculations and reconstruction of accounting records. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So, I guess just off the bat here, we've known each other for about 4 years now. It seems like just shy of 4 years since the original Cryptolina. And since then, it's looking like, according to the studies that we've seen, some recent surveys, about 5% of America, give or take, has Bitcoin in some capacity, or crypto. What have you seen since over the course of these past 4 years in terms of the mood and the opinion of the industry? I mean, how has it changed in your professional fields?
I think from a generic standpoint, it's just the amount of fixing we've seen from the interest level. And as we were talking before, that interest level, of course, comes from really one main thing, and that's the money value and the potential of further gain from that. Along with that, though, is a lot of confusion within the industry, particularly from where I come from, looking at it from the legal standpoint, confusion within a lot of things that relate directly to what Tyler can speak on from a tax standpoint, from a reporting standpoint, but then also from actual criminal activity, from the money laundering is what we often hear. I think a lot of times back when we first started this Cryptolina, you were looking at what are bad people doing with this new could-be good thing. And I was going around and speaking a lot about Bitcoins and explaining to people how it could be positive. It was positive in so many different ways, not even so much just from the standpoint of this is how you can make money, but this is more how it can be utilized. Now we've seen a lot more both. So I would say from the standpoint as a whole, we're in a lot better position as the perception of what Bitcoin is, at least within the legal world.
Yeah, I appreciate you having us again. Like Dan was saying, since the original Cryptolina, in my profession, there really wasn't any talk at all. Like Dan said, I'm an owner in a fairly small CPA firm, 10-person firm, and the good thing about that is I get a lot of direct communication with the public, whether it's clients or simply inquiries coming in. So it's good that I kind of see a lot of those inquiries firsthand. And since 2014 till now, obviously everything ramped up in 2017 with the price jump in Bitcoin specifically. That brought a lot to the forefront. Taxes, accounting, record keeping, everything kind of came to fruition towards the end of last year. And with that, obviously we had some very vague guidance from the IRS in 2014. We haven't had much to go on since then. And there's really been a big demand over the years to specify how we're treating this, and specifically with selling and utilizing cryptocurrencies. And that's been a frustration, obviously, in my business. But we have to kind of deal with it the best way we can, do our due diligence, and help clients kind of steer and report the right way. So I would say, just from a standpoint from then and now, the past 12 months have definitely been a whirlwind and a lot busier.
Yeah, that's certainly something that we're seeing in Washington. One of the top priorities of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, one of the topics that I focus a lot of time on is the development of accounting and reporting standards for digital assets, the development of gap standards, of which there are none right now for digital currencies, digital assets. And we're working with FASB and other standard-setting bodies to at least get the conversation going, put together a comment letter. So that's really interesting to hear that from a small business perspective. But on the topic of virtual currencies, so of course in March 2014 you had mentioned the IRS declared Bitcoin as property, and today it's still being treated that way for tax purposes. However, in 2016 the Treasury Department's own Inspector General completed a review of these practices, and they determined that the IRS currently is not really executing a coordinated strategy, so they recommended, this was the Treasury Department's IG, to put together kind of a roadmap for achievable goals for outcomes and a timeline, and of course it has yet to be implemented. So going on almost a year and a half now. Can you talk a little bit about Section 1031 and the currency swaps and what's going on with tax guidance currently, and is property still the appropriate classification?
Yeah, kind of on 1031 exchanges, we could probably sit here for about 10 hours and talk about it because it's a pretty intricate part of the tax code. 1031 exchanges, just to give you a basic overview, it's basically selling an asset, buying a like-kind asset, like-kind exchange, and basically deferring tax. So if I have a home, an investment property, and I want to sell that and buy another investment property, that's considered a like-kind exchange. There's certain hoops you have to jump through, and you can not pay tax on that, or that sale, that first property, and kind of defer it into the next, and really the tax doesn't wash out until the final sale down the road. So the confusion with 1031 and cryptocurrencies has been, can I sell crypto for and obtain another type of crypto, call it 1031, not pay any tax? I would say in short, no. And basically before 2017, we have a lot going on right now. We just had a big tax reform, the biggest tax reform we've had in 30 years. So a lot of confusion is, was my sale a 1031? Does it qualify? And that was for 2017 and before. The new tax reforms basically said no, that they've cleared that up. It's for real property only, real property being real estate. Before, you're going to have opinions left and right, both ways, if it is, if it isn't. I would say it's not, in the IRS's eyes, knowing how the tax code typically works. The IRS is pretty consistent on how they handle things, and people are going to lose that argument under audit. So I think that's going to get cleared up. One thing to your point, talking about the Inspector General requesting some additional, the AICPA also sent a pretty urgent letter to the IRS recently, within the month, and last month, basically requesting FAQs in supplement to the 2014 regulations. So they're basically saying, what do we do? We got people out there asking us questions. We need some sort of regulatory language on how to tell clients, because clients come to me, and we basically have to apply the standards to the best of our ability, and that's tough to do sometimes. It's a lot of gray area in the tax code. But that FAQ request from the AICPA this year hopefully will supplement the 2014 and clarify 1031 exchanges, valuation, buying, selling as a business, mining, selling it as an investment. They're trying to just clear up a lot of this stuff. And actually having actual regulations written by the IRS, that could take 10 years. And so at least we need to get something to go to.
Yeah, in the property status, I can see it being good for long-term holders, because it's not, the coffee problem I think you touched on. Some previous conversations. It's not for everyday spenders.
Correct. And the tax code works like this in a million different scenarios. A tax code might work well for one person and bad for another. The property classification works great for somebody that buys a crypto and sits on it. And it works bad for somebody that transacts it. So you have a lot of that in the code, and that there's stop gaps and things like de minimis rules where they want to try to say, well, all right, if you go and do something for $600 and below, you don't have to report it. That's not a taxable reporting thing. But those things, there's ways. Then you're going to have people writing code to make sales under $600, and they're never going to report anything. So you have all these things that need to be cleared up, but it's probably going to take a long time.
So David, from your perspective, what are some of the struggles in the industry on the criminal side, on the defense side?
I think one of the main ones that we see is, there are a lot of cases, and has been for hundreds of years, from the standpoint of money laundering. And the amount of work, and for anybody out here that's in the criminal justice field or has been in any form or fashion, when you get into white-collar crimes, that they're very detailed. What I mean by that is we're not talking about a whodunit from a murder standpoint. You go back and look and you interview the witnesses. There's so many different steps and it's so layered. And then once you have that sort of fact pattern figured out, then you've got to apply it to the law in place. Well, when you don't have the law in place, then it's really hard to be able to really enforce anything. So one thing I think that will happen in the next, at least 5 years is you will begin to see more prosecution from the federal side, particularly. I do not see it really coming from your local governments, maybe state agencies, definitely not local agencies. And that's simply because once more, whatever they may come to be, actual laws are put in place and standards are put in place. Because we know a lot of it's still occurring now, but the only ones, as we were talking about earlier this afternoon, that you ever see to any degree of financial fraud, money laundering, different things like that, are just huge, large-scale amounts of money where you're actually seeing the feds get involved. Any of the lower level ones, they don't have the authority, for one, on a lot of times, and two, they really don't have the resources to look at it.
Yeah, and IRS, I know they just, one of the big developments in the past year certainly has been the IRS had a big win over Coinbase in terms of being able to acquire the bid for customer data. And so now the IRS may now legally investigate Coinbase account holders who may not have had paid federal taxes on their virtual profits. But the scope of the summons has been dramatically narrowed. Are we seeing, what can we expect from that going forward, at least
I think on that, it's a perfect example of one that's real simple, and they're trying to dumb it down. They're trying to look at money that was earned, the income that was earned from that. Not saying that that income was earned illegally, but then the fact that they can be able to show what and how much was earned, and then you simply just have to report it. When you can see the gains, you can see where they started, and then you look at what they did report. Whether they actually, whatever they went with it and turned it into fiat, or whatever they did from the point that they actually got that gain, it really doesn't make a difference. All you know is that they've transacted in some form or fashion.
And I think they're only, from what we read, it looks like they're only looking for account holders with over $20,000 in transactions. So not looking for small account holders right now.
They don't have that time.
They don't have the time or resources.
It goes back to that sort of argument, well, if I'm just a small businessman, they don't really care about me, they're not going to pay attention to my tax return. And more often than not, that is true, but that doesn't mean they're not just going to pull some out of the hat. But yeah, the higher the ones, the more that they're going to tax. But you kind of have to take it back to the government. When they're the ones that decided to make Bitcoins and cryptocurrency as a whole property, then they should have been able to start to develop at that time some more regulations, because it is a completely different type of property, if you want to consider it a property, as opposed to what we generally would think about.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, with the Coinbase issue, there's going to be a lot of confusion around that. And, the IRS conveniently starts focusing wherever there's money, and there was a lot of money made in crypto last year, and so they are looking at it. They are certainly dedicating resources. The Coinbase is kind of the headline they wanted to get that going, and so Coinbase is issuing reporting 1099-Bs, things like that. There is some confusion and around some issue right now is with people that are transacting and trading Bitcoin. Specifically taking Coinbase as an example, when people maybe exchange from one exchange to another, send it out of Coinbase to another, Coinbase might still be reporting that like a sale, and that creates confusion with clients, creates confusion with people who get these 1099-Bs and they're like, well, I didn't sell anything, I didn't liquidate anything, I just sent Bitcoin from one exchange to another. But to Coinbase, they're like, well, it's a sale to us, that we're treating it like a sale.
And that's where the good defense comes in, because you've got two things. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, is no defense, no matter what. We all know that. Think about driving down the road, officer, I didn't know that was speeding. Too bad, you're going too fast. Discrepancies or contradictions within the law absolutely is a defense. And I think what you'll start to see is, if in fact some of these become cases, whether they become civil claims from the IRS, or actually there's some criminal claims as well, that's going to be a big angle where the criminal defense is going to come in and look at it and say, hey, you've got it marked here this way it's filed here. There's a lot of confusion here. It's not just ignorance, it's contradictions on your own language. Therefore, you find this person is actually liable for that alleged crime or alleged failure to report, whatnot. That'll be some good material from the defense standpoint.
Yeah, and it's going to come down to, any of this stuff just comes down to keeping record. If you made money and you made a profit, there needs to be some sort of record keeping. There's got to be some sort of reporting. If you just don't do it, that's not going to. Tax avoidance is legal. Tax evasion is illegal. So you can try to game the system and be strategic, but you still have to keep your records. Whether you get a 1099-B or whatever from the exchange, you still got to do your due diligence because it is on the tax in the U.S. It is on the taxpayer. Regardless of who prepares your return or whatever you can claim. I just didn't know. You have to really be diligent and keeping track and doing things. And if you're running a business, it's even more because there's a million other things going on. You might have employees, you might pay them with crypto, things like that. It's a whole another mess of reporting around that.
And it still goes back to the amount of resources you have. You look at two other big areas that we have here in the United States that have really come about in the last several years. One, obviously, being marijuana, not just medicinal, but recreational marijuana. That's a whole other realm in and of itself that they're trying to determine from a taxable standpoint. And then, just over the last several weeks, they legalized gaming. I mean, that's going to change everything. So you've got to think to yourself, are they still going to continue down that road with X number of people and X number of sources and resources going towards cryptocurrency? Or now is that some of that getting diverted? You really have three separate entities in and of themselves, which are all on the forefront. And you can even argue, particularly the gaming one, is above and beyond all of it.
Another issue is that the federal government of the United States itself, they can't agree on the classification of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies among their own agencies. You have FinCEN, OCC, CFTC, what's the commodity, IRS. So there's a lot of unclarity there. There's a lot of legal cloudiness still that remains.
And that's what the defense lawyer is going to love, is that cloudiness. When it comes to that point,
Now, if say I'm mining, and I used to mine a long time ago, I don't do it anymore, but I know there's a lot of miners here and all over the country. It's a very booming industry right now. What do I have to worry about from a taxable standpoint if I mine my own Bitcoin or Litecoin, Ethereum Classic, as opposed to buying it off an exchange? Any thoughts on that?
I think, Tyler, that would be more to you, but I'm still thinking you're looking at it then from just almost the organic business perspective of what you have in, what you're valuing it to be, and then, of course, then what you receive for it.
Yeah, with mining, the biggest, I would say the biggest headache with mining is tracking your average daily value or, tracking all that so you can really value what you do have and what you're mining. And how you're treating that as a business. Like I said, when you are a business, you're just falling under a whole nother, if that's treated as a trade or business, you have expenses, you keep track of your expenses, your power, your hardware that you buy, your write-offs that can go with that business, and then properly reporting that, whether it's on what we call a Schedule C on a tax return, on a personal return, or if maybe you're incorporated some other way. But, it's a lot like any other business, and just because there is specific verbiage by the IRS in the code about mining Bitcoin or mining crypto, you still overlay the tax code onto that activity. We still know how to treat that, to the best of our ability. So if you are running a business, if you are mining, things like that, there still is code that we pretty much work with, just like any other small business.
Well, I want to take some questions from the audience because I know there's several out there. It's a very important topic in the industry. So Todd, I'm not sure if you want to pass the microphones. Anybody have any questions for the...
One second, let me get the... Okay, good, we got the mic on. Can we get the lights up a little bit as well, too? All right, I think I got one here, and I know we've got at least one over there.
Yeah, hi. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the new opportunity zone provisions in the recent tax bill.
I've looked into it a little bit. I'm not extremely knowledgeable, but opportunity zone benefits essentially, and I might just correct me if I'm wrong, there's certain locations that geographically identified by the IRS that you can, if you invest in, put money into, it can be treated. There's a bit of a tax advantage the way that money's treated. There isn't a whole lot of guidance. It's basically one page on the IRS that kind of discusses it. But I've looked into it a little bit, and I would say handle it kind of with due care. What I've done, I'm dealing with a client now, is putting some money into a deal, expecting it to be treated as an opportunity zone, and basically what we're treating it like is kind of like a 1031 exchange. So he sold something, and that gain he got from that, what he sold, he's putting it into this new investment. And we're basically just treating it like a 1031, which means kind of have a qualified intermediary, which means basically someone else that escrows the money. So funds can't go to you personally, they kind of have to go through proper channels. And so we'll see more guidance come out. They expect late summer to have some more guidance. I wouldn't expect that. They never hit their marks. I would say towards the end of the year. But it's interesting. And I would say just think of it like a 1031 right now.
And that was a direct result of the new tax reform bill, the Trump administration.
Exactly. So if taxes weren't fun enough up until now, they've gotten a lot more fun for 2018 moving forward because we have a whole lot to read through.
Okay, we got another question I think over here.
So, of course, in this space, there's a ton of exchanges. Some of these exchanges exist outside the U.S. Are you required to report the currencies that you purchase or trade in other exchanges via FBAR? And then the other thing, too, is that how do you treat airdrops and then money or currencies that are related to supernodes, master nodes, and secure nodes? Would that be related to how you describe the tax consequences of mine?
I can't get too specific into the airdrops and things like that, but what I can speak to is do FBAR reporting. If you do have money, it's pretty simple. If you got money in a foreign account, I would report whatever that value is according to those rules, and I would certainly consult with whoever does the taxes and can help you file that form. They've gotten a lot more. The IRS has become more strict on that, and I think if there is an exchange and an account and you have value in that would be required reporting.
Okay, do we have a question?
Let me begin by thanking the gentleman for what I think was a very informative session. I suspect this question is directed toward you, David. As a holder of cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin, is there a system in place where I can assign a beneficiary to my digital assets at the time of my passing?
Absolutely, you're going to look at that any other way, but the difference, obviously, in this situation, you can compare it to a home. At what point that you pass, whatever your home was worth at that time, the value of what it is going to be what it is at the time that it actually passes. But you would want to make sure that that was included within any other assets you may have. It's always funny when you look at different people's wills. Sometimes they're down to the detail of a certain lamp that they do, a certain relative light or thing, and then others, that have millions upon millions of dollars are very general and basic. But yeah, absolutely. What account, identifying the specific account, but knowing that account and where it may fall at your point of passing obviously plays into it a little bit different than it would maybe some other properties that you have that would be passing through.
Yeah, and inheritance stuff with inheritance issues have been coming up a good bit, especially people who pass away, obviously, with a big value. And there's been some interesting stories of people that can't access wallets and things like that, which is can be, I would assume, very frustrating.
Yeah, that's where power of attorney would come in too. It's going to be a little bit more than what they're probably used to having to do. But that is something that anybody is involved in that industry, and I'm kind of glad you brought that up. If you are heavily involved, just like you would have a power of attorney for other, different legal issues that you may have up, contraction, no matter what happened, just like a medical power of attorney, that person could come into play. Now, it may take a little bit more from a layer standpoint to get to where they needed to do in regards to your wallet, but they would be the one that would have that responsibility.
And it's, from a tax standpoint, consulting with the state attorneys and tax attorneys and CPAs that specialize in the states, getting that what they call stepped up basis at death is pretty important. Especially now, because you can avoid a lot of tax once it passes through the estate. So it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of really interesting cases out there right now.
Okay, I think we have one more question.
One more? Yeah. Or
Hello. I'm a software engineer for cryptocurrency, and I get paid in Ethereum. So I guess I'm wondering, what are the tax implications of that? Do I pay tax based on what Ethereum was worth at the time that I received it, or at the time that I sell it for US dollars?
Yeah. So right now, what I would suggest is, the way the IRS code is written is when you get constructive receipt of anything and you have some sort of economic gain, which when you receive that crypto whatever it is, you would value it at the time of receipt, and that would be the value of what you're getting, and you report that respectively on your tax return. And so I would use whatever value it was the day you got it. That's what you use. That's your basis.
I think we might actually have time. Does anybody else? We got
one more.
We have at least time for one.
Okay, so how would someone who's not necessarily able to pay their own taxes and is young, like 18 or below, pay their gains for their taxes? Would it be on their parents or on their own tax form?
It depends. Typically, if you are, you can file as a dependent on your parents, but typically, in that case, it might be more beneficial. It's hard to answer tax questions because everybody's different. But it might be best to report it on your own tax return because some people might pay zero capital gains. So it gets to a point of just looking at the scenario. It might be worth to claim as a dependent on your parents and file your own return and don't claim yourself. There's a million different scenarios. But I would, some people don't pay any capital gains, and it might be one of those situations. But it's just a case-by-case basis.
Dan, do you have time for one or two more? I think we got a couple of
Right
minutes.
here? Yeah, we have one more, I think.
How you doing? Thank you guys for all the answers you're giving us. If you're overseas on Binance, for example, with your crypto and you trade using privacy coins with this whole IP obfuscation and all the technology for privacy, how would the IRS even know to find what you're doing?
Yeah, they probably would.
I'm asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
What I would tell your friend, what I would tell your friend is,
You don't get, if I didn't break the, right, if nobody catches me, I never broke the
that's one thing I would say is you don't have to get a form. You don't have to, a form doesn't have to be sent to the IRS to be liable for reporting taxes, reporting and paying your taxes. The IRS doesn't really care what drug dealers do, but if they pay the tax, thumbs up. Everybody, whether you get a W-2, 1099 or nothing, you're still responsible to report to the United States. So I wouldn't look at it from the standpoint, how would they know? There's a million other ways that they could find out. If we're talking about a large amount of money, they trace bank deposits, and there's $1 million going into a bank account, zero on a tax return, they're probably going to look at that.
Yeah, and from the seizure standpoint, sorry to interrupt, but from just looking at it from the criminal side, the seizure standpoint, it's starting to get pretty easy. Let's say, as you said, quote unquote, they don't know, but then they start doing a comparative analysis of the simplistic of what you did actually claim, and then what your assets are, what your lifestyle is, that sort of thing. They start putting two and two together, and then at the point that then it reverses on you. Then it's like, we're going to hold it until you can justify it. And then you're kind of at that point maybe walking yourself into a potential criminal act.
Yeah, the lifestyle audits are always interesting to read because you got a guy who reports 20,000 in income.
Right. Well, it all depends on what you are doing with it too. No matter how much you're making, obviously you could have a landscaping company, quote unquote, that maybe sold different types of plants under the table and not reporting it. And if you reported your salary as just that your wife made $50,000 a year as a school teacher, and somehow you're living in an $800,000 house, your kids go to private school, and you have 4 cars, that would be something they would kind of wonder, where's the receipts from all those lawnmowers that you supposedly bought and all that yard work. You see it all the time, and that's where it flips on you, where then they seize it, don't have it yet, but will keep it, and then you have to prove yourself the other way. You have to prove yourself back righteous.
All right.
Okay. I was going to say, do we want to take, we got plenty of
Well, it's a popular topic. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say taxes are always popular. Are we going to get one more?
So, as a day trader and miner, starting back in January, what happens if you mix, say, your investments with what you mine, and sell it on different exchanges, go back and forth? How do you keep track of all that and report that? And, well, yeah. But that's the second part of my question. How do you prove, say, that you liquidated all of your assets?
The tracking is it's just tedious. It's as of right now, there are some sites and things that assist. But right now, as miners, some of the clients that I have, I'm getting 30-page reports of transactions, and we're throwing it in a spreadsheet, and we're calculating, we're having to look at daily values and stuff like that and report accordingly. So it is simply a tracking nightmare right now, and hopefully that will get fixed. And people a lot smarter than me are writing good code that can help people out. So right now, if you're buying and selling, exchange, all that stuff, you got to really track it because liquidating is a sale. Exchange to exchange is not a sale if we're talking about the same crypto. So you got to really track that stuff carefully. You can't report nothing, and you got to report something. And having the due diligence in between is important because under audit, you got to prove if you report $50,000 in income or whatever that is, you have to have the source documentation to prove it. So it's basically just a nightmare right now, and that's the cost of doing. It's the cost of doing business right now.
Okay. Dan, I think we're one more, Dan, and then I think we're right at our time limit.
I think I don't want to go over the next panel, but yeah. Go ahead.
First of all, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. My question is, I understand that ignorance is not a reason, to circumvent the law, but what if the lawmakers are ignorant? And what I mean by that is, as a community, we like our currency to be decentralized, but we're united in our passions. So, and our love for Bitcoin and what it means. So you've seen tax laws change, right? So how important or how big can it be if we unite as a community and arm ourselves with lobbyists so the politicians are more aware of what they're making laws on?
I think that's a very good question. And I think right now, the Bitcoin community, the crypto community is really tight, you're right. And there's a lot of passion. I have a lot of passion. I know David does too, and Dan. And right now, it is locking in with the politicians that are out there lobbying, and locking in with them. The AICPA, in my world, is getting more involved in it, and they are lobbying on behalf. I work with, I'm on the board with my state associations in South Carolina, and we're getting more involved, and we work with state legislators to try to educate. It is going to be a learning curve. Everybody learns every day in this industry. So I think you're right. And I think right now, the IRS, by what they've provided us in 2014, it's basically because they don't know. They don't know what it is. I've tried to get on certain boards of the IRS, but they don't want to really dip into it. They don't have the money. So I think it's going to be just a learning curve for now.
Dan could probably talk to this both since he's actually in DC, but one thing I'll say, and we're seeing it on the national level, and this isn't to get into politics, but you're seeing it really with both parties, Democrat and Republican, but on a much smaller scale, like you're talking about the cryptocurrency community as a whole, Bitcoin, doing this for as long as I have, which is not that long, but within this world, and it's a little while, there's a lot of splintering too. So when you're talking about trying to put lobby and education or whatever values you're wanting to promote or put forth in front of those that are making the decisions, there's not a whole lot of unity, at least on a tremendous amount of issues. So I think that's another problem. Wouldn't you say, Dan?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, what we do at the Chamber of Digital Commerce is, one of the working groups that I mentioned earlier in the conversation was the Digital Assets Accounting Consortium. But that's just one of the half a dozen groups that we have on various topics. But it is like herding cats because there's a lot of different companies, a lot of different blockchain tokens. Everybody has their own opinion. And by working together collectively, we try to remain agnostic. We represent the entire space. But it's going to take a lot more time, and we do most of our time actually is spent on education. And that includes educating the IRS, the FDIC, these other regulatory bodies to give them an update and tell them this is what the industry's, where we stand and what we're trying to do.
And at the end of the day, it's for profit, right? I mean, so you're going to always have people that may disagree or in some ways have a different thing that they're concerned about as far as what should be the high priority because that affects their business, whatever part they play in it, more than what maybe it affects yours. And that's another part that I think it makes it a little bit of a turnoff from the political standpoint where they're just saying that there's too many moving parts here, we have too many other things we're looking at, and it's difficult to really all bring it all together and get a true foundation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm sure everybody, thank you.